Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to already the fourth episode of our webinar series, R&D Activities on sCO2 in Europe by ETN Global. This is Jitka Spolcova, and I will moderate the session of today. I work as a project officer for ETN Global, which is an international membership association that represents the entire gas turbine value chain. If you remember, last time we spoke about heat exchangers, in particular recuperators and coolers. And today we will continue with heat exchangers, but we will speak about primary heaters. You probably know that this session is quite special because this webinar is an official part of CERTH 2023, which is European Sustainable Energy Week. And this episode is part of the Sustainable Energy Day. So we are one of the energy days of CERTH 23. As always, this webinar's episode is supported by 9 European R&D projects. They are either EU or national funded. Once you receive the presentation, you will be able to click on the logos of these individual projects to find out more information about them. I have a few comments before we start. They are quite unentertaining, but for a seamless webinar experience, I have to go through them. So first of all, I need to tell you that this webinar is recorded. This is important to mention. Secondly, I would like to ask you to mute your mics and switch off your cameras unless you speak. The next point are questions. We love questions, so we really want you to ask questions. If you want to do it, you have basically 2 options. You can either write your question in the meeting chat, or you can wait till the end. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the whole webinar, so after 3 o'clock. And I can assure you that all the questions will be answered either directly in the chat or at the end during the Q&A session. If you write the question in the chat, it's very opportune to mention which speaker you are addressing because it makes the answering of the question a bit easier. Another point are the smartphones. It would be great if you have them with you because you will need them for our Slido questions. And the last point, presentations. After the session, you will receive the whole presentation deck that you will see today, so there is no special need to take any notes unless you really want to, because as I said, you will receive the link to all the presentations. So what are the interesting people of today? Of course, the speakers. So we have 3 speakers. First of all is Panagiotis Drosatos from CERTH, who will give you a presentation about CFD-aided conceptual design of a cooler in sCO2 cycles. The second speaker comes from Cockerill Renewables. It's Maxime Rouzès, and he will talk about development of a high-efficiency particle sCO2 heat exchanger for CSP applications. And the last one, who will finish the session of today, is Damien Serret from TEMISTh, who will talk about additive manufacturing and how it helps the energy sector. So before we go to presentations, as always, I would like you to take your phones because the first Slido question is here. So these are the joining instructions. So scan the QR code. And whenever you are ready, this is the first question. What's the main challenge for the primary heaters? You think there are costs, temperature, pressure, corrosion, or size? If you like, you can choose more than one answer. I see that the Slido answers are settling down. Many of you answered. Thank you very much. We have a good news because I think that you are in the right session, because many of these topics will be covered in the presentations of my colleagues. But to debrief this, the question, I would like my colleagues to step in and say a few words, what they think about the result of this Slido question. Maxime, may I ask you for the briefing of this question?
Sorry, Jitka?
May I ask you to debrief this question, please?
Yeah. I think we have good results because the temperature is one of the key parameters. One of the key challenge to increase the efficiency of heat exchanger. So it'll be addressed in the case of CSP for sure. And this is one of the reasons that we go for solid particles instead of other fluids.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. So I think we can conclude the Slido question, and we can go slowly to the first presentation. And the first presenter is Panagiotis Drosatos. And while Panagiotis is preparing his presentation and sharing of his screen, I will say a few words about him to introduce him. So he works now at the moment as a research associate at CERTH, which is Center for Research and Technology in Greece. He obtained his master's degree in mechanical engineering at the National Technical University of Athens, and he's now a PhD candidate at the same university. His research interests include, for example, numerical simulations of combustion in boilers. Panagiotis is part of the team working on the Cool Heat project, and in his presentation, he will speak about the computational fluid dynamics simulations related to the project. So Panagiotis, the floor is yours. Thank you. We don't hear you.
So thank you, Jitka, for your kind introduction. Hope you see my presentation. Hello, everyone. My name is Panagiotis Drosatos. As it is mentioned, my presentation is focused on a CFD-aided conceptual design of a cooler which is integrated in supercritical CO2 cycles for novel waste heat to power plant layouts. We are going to present the approximation that is followed for the numerical simulation of such type of systems and the accompanying challenges. More specifically, in the framework of a European project, namely the Cool Heat project, the research efforts were focused on the demonstration of a compact and efficient supercritical CO2 cycle for waste heat to power applications at megawatt scale. In this context, CERTH provided support to industrial partners in order to numerically simulate, verify, and optimize critical components design, namely the cooler one, in terms of thermal behavior and performance by using CFD tools. The initial design of the cooler heat exchanger comprises two cells with 40 rows of 4U tube seats. In fact, this specific component is a two-stream heat exchanger. The interior domain consists of the working medium, the supercritical CO2 flow, while the exterior one consists of the cooling medium, water. Due to specific restrictions, we are not allowed to disclose any further information regarding the initial design, but we can highlight that there are major challenges in the numerical simulation due to complicated geometric configurations. In order to simulate such a component, it was necessary to utilize the software package of ANSYS Fluent. This specific numerical tool, however, imposes a specific restriction. More specifically, when NIST real gas libraries are utilized, then the domain of the mathematical problem needs to be consisted of the same medium. However, this is not our case, because as I have already mentioned, this in fact is a two-stream heat exchanger. So we had to implement a different approach, an alternative pathway towards the simulation of the component. More specifically, we discretize the whole component into two different parts. The first one consists of the interior domain and the tube, and the second one consists of the exterior domain and the same tube. Then the two domains were calculated successively and were mutually interacted between each other through a boundary condition, for example, the temperature distribution on a common interface. This, of course, imposes further challenges in the numerical simulation. So, the proposed methodology for the simulation of such systems consists of the following steps. First, we have to conduct the validation study in order to ensure that the NIST properties as provided by the numerical tool and the implemented mathematical models are capable of providing accurate and validated results. Then we have to conduct the gradient dependent study in order to quantify which numerical grid density is necessary to approximate as closely as possible the real conditions. Then we have to proceed with the simulation of only one row of tubes, and then the simulation of the whole component can take place if, however, this is considered as feasible in terms of the total computational cost. The first step, as I mentioned, is the validation study. Here, we use experimental data regarding the thermal stratification phenomena of a supercritical CO2 flow inside horizontal heated pipes. In order to evaluate the results, we utilize the developed temperature field on the top, bottom, and side of the horizontal pipes versus the working medium enthalpy. In the framework of this procedure, we develop and utilize 4 different numerical grids, starting from coarser and ending up to very fine numerical grids in order to span a wide variety of grid densities and C+ absolute values, starting from very high and ending up to very low absolute values, even lower than unity. Among the several tests we performed, we selected to present these 3 indicative ones, case 2, case 9, and case 11. All these 3 cases present the SST kappa omega model as the turbulence model and 3 different numerical grids, 1 coarse, 1 middle, and 1 very fine numerical grid. The scope of this investigation is to examine if the proposed turbulence model is capable of providing accurate results and the effect of the developed and implemented numerical grid density on the derived results. Based on the simulation we performed, we derived this spatial distribution on the top of the heated horizontal pipe. As you can see, the SST kappa omega turbulence model with coarse numerical grid is incapable of providing satisfactory agreement against the experimental data. See case 2. On the contrary, when the same turbulence model is utilized with middle or very fine numerical grid densities, then there is a better agreement with the experimental data. The necessity for high grid densities imply further challenges in the numerical simulation. If we compare cases 9 and 11, we can see minor differences between each other. So we can conclude that these two cases present a grid-dependent solution. Finally, it is needed to be underlined that the selection of different turbulence model deteriorates the agreement with the reference data, no matter which the grid density applied is. Given the fact that cases 9 and 11 present a satisfactory agreement with the experimental data, we selected to provide additional results from the case with middle numerical grid, case 9. As regards the temperature distribution on the top, on the bottom, and on the side of the horizontal pipe. And as you can see for these specific locations, the agreement of the CFD results against the experimental data are even better. So in overall, we can conclude that the SST kappa omega turbulence model is able to provide satisfactory agreement against real operating conditions for this type of physical phenomena and supercritical CO2 flows. When, however, fine numerical grids are implemented and utilized, presenting Psi plus values lower than unity. The next step is the grid-dependent study, where we used 4 different numerical grids, again with different grid densities, in order to span a wide variety of Psi plus values, ranging from very high to very low absolute values, even lower than unity. The evaluation of the results is based on the temperature distribution both along the tube center line and close to the inlet to the interior surfaces. And as you can see, the first 3 cases, which are characterized by coarser numerical grids, show minor differences between each other. However, when a very fine numerical grid is implemented and utilized, the obtained results are totally different. So again, it is proved that high accuracy of the derived results demands a very fine numerical grid when the SST kappa omega turbulence model is implemented. The next step is the simulation of only one row of tubes. For the interior domain, we utilize 2 different numerical grids consisting of approximately 8 million mixed elements and 25 million hexa elements respectively. The first case is represented by a coarser mesh, while the second domain, the second case, is represented by a very fine numerical grid presenting Psi plus values lower than unity. As regards the exterior domain, we have developed and utilized 5 different numerical grid densities in order again to span a wide variety of absolute Psi plus values. The last 3 cases are characterized by very fine numerical grids presenting Psi plus values lower than unity. The evaluation is again performed by using the temperature distribution both along the center line of the tube and close to the interior surfaces of the metal tube. As you can see, close to the here, if you can see my laser pointer, here in the U-turn formation and close to the wall boundaries, there's a temperature increase of the working medium due to the exhibited zero heat or adiabatic boundary conditions, while in the same area and along the tube center line, the trend for gradual temperature decrease is also experienced. Furthermore, the temperature gradient is steeper in the Psi plus part of the tube formations, which are closer to the cooling medium inlet, because in this specific zone, lower absolute temperature values of the cooling medium are experienced, so higher wall heat transfer coefficients can be developed. Among all 4 tubes, in each case examined, the differences in the temperature distribution are minor. So we are focused only on the presentation of the first tube. for all cases investigated. And this observation implies the development of a homogeneous heat flux field. Finally, the last three cases, which are characterized by very fine numerical grids, present minor differences between each other. Here are the conclusions that I have already mentioned. And here you can see the absolute values regarding the wall heat transfer coefficient for both the parts of the tubes before and after the U-turn formation. Of course, the highest absolute wall heat transfer coefficient values are developed in the C+ part, the first part of the tube's formation, due to the reasons that we have already explicitly and explained. However, the differences among the cases are significant, so we can conclude that the impact of the developed numerical grid density on the derived results is significant. Some lighter differences can be spotted among the last three cases, which all are characterized by high grid densities. Here you can see the developed heat flux density field as derived by the numerical simulations. You can see that indeed this specific parameter is developed homogeneously among the four tubes for each specific case considered. And the slightest differences are spotted among the last three cases, which are characterized by very fine numerical grids. And finally, here you can see the overall heat transfer for each specific tube and for all in overall, in each case examined. As you can see, smaller differences are observed in the last three cases due to the high grid density. However, the fact that we cannot attain a grid-dependent solution unless a very fine numerical grid is implemented and utilized imposes further challenges in the numerical simulations of such a component. So it is evaluated as insufficient to proceed with the simulation of the whole component due to specific computational resources restrictions. And we can conclude that the conclusions and the remarks for the overall component in terms of thermal behavior, performance, and efficiency can only be based on the conclusions and the results of the simulations of only one row of U-tubes. So in order to conclude, we can highlight that the validation process indicated that the kappa omega turbulence model is capable of providing accurate results with only a very fine numerical grid presenting C+ values lower than unity. This, however, imposes high demands on computational resources, thus proving the simulation of this specific component quite challenging. The investigation was forced to be focused on only one row of tubes. A grid-dependent solution cannot be achieved. However, minor differences are spotted among cases with very fine numerical grid densities. And this is needed to be mentioned for this type of simulations for such component and supercritical CO2 flows. And in similar cases, for further CFD model calibration and validation, we need additional experimental data. Thank you very much for your attention. Jitka, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Panagiotis, for a great presentation. So I would like to remind to everyone, if you have questions, you can either keep them for the end to ask directly, or if you prefer, you can already write in the chat, and I'm sure that Panagiotis will have the opportunity to have a look and directly answer in the chat, or we will take your question at the end. Yes. Okay, so I think we can proceed to the next speaker, which is Maxime Rouzès. Maxime will prepare his presentation, and in the meantime, I will explain to you who he is and where he comes from. So Maxime works as an R&D engineer in the Belgian-based company Cockerill Renewables. He's part of the solar and thermal storage team, covering CSP business such as molten salt solar receiver. He's in charge of R&D projects ranging from sCO2 particle heat exchanger development in CSP applications to complete thermal storage solutions. After getting his PhD in 2015 in Toulouse in France, Maxime first worked in the spatial field, carrying out zero-gravity flights before moving to renewable topics and CSP business. Maxime is part of the Compass sCO2 project, and I'll leave it up to you to continue, Maxime.
Thank you, Jitka, for these kind words. Today I'm gonna start maybe going full screen first.
Yes. Thank you.
Right. So the goal today is to present, to say a few words about John Cockerill and especially my team, the solar and thermal storage team, and how we are involved in the EU-funded Compass sCO2 project. And then the topic of today, which is about the development of industrial scale particulate CO2 heat exchanger and the different challenges that we are facing in the design, and some words about the different perspective that we got from the work. So John Cockerill is a 200 years family-owned company. So initially it was steam generation, and now it goes from defense to environment to energy, which is my branch. We do from design up to the installation on site. But here, the application I'm going to talk about is the CSP, so the concentrated solar power plant. So how does it work? Very quickly, you have mirrors on the grounds which are reflecting the solar rays up to a central tower where there's a solar receiver at the top in which molten salt is flowing and is heated up by the radiation of the sun. And then you use this heat stored in molten salt to generate electricity through the use of a steam generator and a turbine. So very, very quickly. And here in the solar and thermal storage team, we have two main products. The first one is the solar receiver. As you can see here, this is a picture from the DWAPO plant in Dubai, which is currently at the end of the commissioning. So it's working almost at nominal load. And in John Cockerill, we provided the solar receiver, which is at the top of the tower. So this is the first product. And we also offer a steam generator with molten salt. So this is here a view of the 3D model of the steam generator. When I was talking about thermal storage solution very quickly, we are also connected to the Carnot battery world in the sense that we are also involved in the development of electrical heaters, as you can see here. So we can offer also a complete solution from the electrical heaters to the steam generator and also the molten salt, the storage with the tanks. Here it goes to a Compass sCO2 project. To do all that, we need to combine different technologies and especially CSP plants with particles, so solid particles coupled with sCO2 Brighton power cycles. And at the interface of both, you have the particle CO2 heat exchanger. And this is where is the need to develop new materials which are able to withstand very extreme conditions in terms of temperature and pressure. So this is the main focus of the Compass sCO2 project, the development of new materials. And in the scope, we are responsible in JC for two things. The first thing is to carry out the design of an industrial heat exchanger. And the second thing is to design a pilot which will be tested at a lab scale, which is about 40 kilowatt. It's a 40 kilowatt heat exchanger, but it will allow to have a proof of concept and to demonstrate that all the material selection that has been done is validated. So here we're talking about this kind of heat exchanger. So on one side, on the particle side, you have the inlet temperature at 900 degrees C and the outlet around 600. And on the sCO2 side, it goes the other way around. The sCO2 is heated up from 530 degrees up to 700 degrees C. So we want to increase the temperature because it allows to increase also quite significantly the efficiency of the sCO2 Brighton power cycles. So going up to, in the case of compass sCO2, 49%, sorry. And all that is being done with a high pressure as well, around 250 bar. So in this case, the flow rates are quite important because the power is around 100 megawatt, 130 megawatt, sorry. So this is mainly the kind of environments that we have for designing the heat exchanger, high power, high temperatures, but also high gradients. High pressure, and if you combine sCO2 and solid particles, you have corrosive on one side and erosive environment on the other side of the tube. So all that lead to the fact that the selection of material and the cost linked to that will be one of the key parameters for the design. So basically here, very quickly, so the engineering, we will have to make compromises between the three different items here, which is the power, the total power with the heat balance, the arrangement that we want with the tubes and all the selection of the materials. And obviously, as the first rows on the top of the heat exchanger will be impacted by solid particles at 900 degrees and having also sCO2 flowing inside at 700 degrees C, we can imagine that the stresses will be very high. So we need to investigate this aspect with the thermomechanical stresses calculation here. So we'll try, there's no magical recipe. This is all a matter of compromise between cost and all the design criteria that we have here. Very quickly, we are used in John Cockerill for this case to utilize the ASME code. So we based our analysis on that. We just compared the different allowable stresses, especially at very high temperature, as you can see here, above 600 degrees C, which is almost 200 degrees, 100 degrees more than the molten salt. And then it is also temperature dependent. So we did this process several rounds, calculating all that. And then we ended up with a geometrical arrangement and also a diameter of the tube. And we did that for different materials and compared. So just a fun fact here to show some of the challenges that we faced. That's what we call the banana effect, simply because the temperature angular distribution along the extreme tube is angle dependent. So it gives this kind of profile, and it impacts also all the heat transfer coefficient, and it needs to be accounted in the different calculation, even in the first preliminary steps of the calculation. So we have these two effects that we have in the calculation, and then we proceeded further with the selection of the different materials. Here we defined different ranges of temperature, as you can see here, and depending on the temperatures, the design temperature, we compared AINS 282, for instance, with Inconel. And for the areas in the heat exchanger where the temperature are lower, we can consider either type of material, as you can see here in the table. But when we design the heat exchanger, we need also to take into account the manufacturing aspects, especially because here we worked at very high pressure. So this is almost only tailor-made tubes, meaning very high thicknesses of the tube. So this is all a matter of material procurement, and sometimes with this kind of material that we need, there is a very long lead time, and there's also other questions, as you can see here, but I'll come back to that later on. And on the right-hand side of the slide here, there's also the question of the transportation, because this is very expensive, and we need to make sure that we're going to produce to manufacture a heat exchanger that can be brought on site. So here we also listed some of the main parameters that we need to account for in the transport for the transportation aspects. And finally, taking all that, we ended up with this, let's say, not hybrid solution, but modular solution, most exactly. So in each cases, in each module, they have a casing, a proper casing, and there'll be two different areas with two different materials. So for the top rows, where the thermomechanical stresses are the highest, it will be a nickel-based alloy. And then on the bottom half of the heat exchanger, let's say, more or less, we will have more non-noble material. We use here intermediate headers. This is more convenient, and also the technology is developed here, have modules interchangeable. So this is just the isometric view, and then I show you the front view and the left view, not the heat exchanger properly inside. But we'll come back to that later. So you see here, there's all the technology of the solar heat exchanger, the particular CO2 heat exchanger. Mainly, this is what we offer here for this kind of heat exchanger and power. I think I can now continue with the main conclusion. So here, it's all a matter of selecting the good material with regards to the temperature and the pressure, but also the different fluids. I didn't say a lot of words on the corrosive aspects, but there's also a lot of tests being done in Compass. And obviously, all these materials are very expensive materials, so a proper detailed cost of the heat exchanger needs to be done. It's ongoing, but we need to converge to a final geometry, and everything is ongoing here. So in this regard, we also need to consider, because this is big babies, this heat exchanger, we do have to consider the manufacturing, but the transportation, and also a potential assembly on site, which can really impact the cost. And here we offer a new design with more modular solutions that can be transported by boats and by road. We offer with Compass sCO2 a lab scale pilot test, also to validate the materials and the geometry. And there will also have an update on the business case, and most specifically an analysis, a technical economic analysis of the industrial solutions here. So I think I'm done. Many thanks for your attention. And now, Jitka, I think I'll give you the flow. I'll give you back the flow.
Thank you very much, Maxime. Great presentation. So the next presenter is Damien Serret. While he's getting ready, I will also make a small introduction of him. So Damien works for a company called TEMISTH, and he joined this company in 2015 and is currently responsible for the innovations department, covering also innovative market development for compact heat exchanger produced by advanced manufacturing process, as well as additive manufacturing, friction stir welding, or casting. During his studies, Damien defended a thesis on heat transfer with phase change in microgravity environment. After this, he performed a postdoctoral project at the Atomic Energy Center for 2 years. And Damien is part of the desalination project team. So Damien should typically start his presentation now, and he did get ready. However, Damien, I'm sorry, I will turn you down because I'll make another introduction of yours by presenting the second Slido that we have, which will actually introduce your presentation. Yeah. So instead of your presentation, I will share my screen with the Slido.
Yeah.
I hope that everyone can see it well. You don't need another QR code because it's still the same, but anyway, in case you need it or if you came late, there's one in the left corner. And the question that will introduce Damien's presentation is, what's the typical size of the heat exchanger for powdered bed fusion additive manufacturing? So I see that the answers got a little bit mixed up because they are upside down. So it's less than 10 centimeters cube, more than 70, or somewhere in between. I see this still people typing, but I think that the results are quite settled. So yeah. Perhaps Damien, you can debrief on the Slido.
Yes, I will share my screen.
Thank you.
And yeah, just to show. No, it's going to be share. Yes, so regarding the answer that we obtained with this question in 2018, it's the typical, yes, additive manufacturing machine was between 10 and 70 cubic centimeter. So I'll make a precision. We talk about laser powder bed fusion technology because there are also other additive manufacturing techniques like direct energy deposition, but we will be focused on this LPBF technology, which is widely used to produce heat exchanger. So yeah, as I already say, in 2018, here you have 3 examples of machines produced in US, in Europe, and in China, and the 3 concepts are close to 50 cubic centimeter on each side. And you see that in China, there is the beginning of the increasing in 1 dimension. And I repeat the exercise to make a list of different machines in 2023. And currently, there is an increase of the typical size that can be printed or manufactured. On all the platform, you have the Sapphire from Velo 3D, you obtain half a cubic meter. The IMCM machine, yes, you obtain also a quarter of cubic meter. So the SLM solution also produce quite large. I mean, there is a mistake. It's 600 by 600 by 600. And one point very interesting is that they implement 12 lasers, so they increase the manufacturing rate up to 1,000 cubic centimeter per hour. And in China, you have also some very interesting development to produce some very large parts. So Farsoon is developing a machine to be able to produce a parts, some very long part and very interesting volume. 1,700 on one side, and Ipris 3D company is also developing a 1 cubic, very large machine to produce some parts larger than 1 cubic meter, and implementing also 9 lasers to obtain a good manufacturing rate. So the tendance, the trend is to increase the size. So the IM heat exchanger will be bigger and bigger in the future, and the manufacturing process will be faster and faster. It's the global trend for the additive manufacturing machine. So now I will come to my presentation, so which will be dedicated to how additive manufacturing process will help the energy sector. Yeah. And I will apply this this manufacturing process to a primary heat exchanger case, which need to be developed in the desalination project, which is funded by the European Union. So as outlined in my talk, first I will present the TEMISTh company, because we are a very small research and development company dedicated to thermal management. Second point, I will make a focus on additive manufacturing for heat exchanger. Third, I will present the desalination project and the main constraint for the primary heat exchanger that we need to deliver at the end of the project. So first, TEMISTh, we are a small company based in France, close to Marseille, in the south of France, where mainly involved in 3 areas. First, we develop some design, and we work a lot on CFD and finite element analysis to optimize our products. We have also some activities to deliver some prototype and some tailored solution, thanks to advanced manufacturing technique like additive manufacturing, but also friction stir welding. And we have also a small activity on testing and qualification in order to validate our optimization. So we work mainly in two markets. So the first one is aerospace and defense, and the second one is energy and oil and gas activity. It is at the equilibrium between the two markets, so 50% by 50%. And regarding our domain of activity, first one, we work a lot on electrification, so we deliver some cold plates and some integrated thermal heat exchanger. And here we will talk about the supercritical carbon dioxide heat exchanger, so at high pressure and high temperature level, and how to optimize and deliver some more compact solutions thanks to additive manufacturing. So regarding the additive manufacturing, what is the impact of the additive manufacturing on the heat exchanger area? So on the left side, you have I make a survey on patent and scientific publication with additive manufacturing and heat exchanger, and also just with heat exchanger awards. And what you can see that there is two order of difference between the results. So when you look for heat exchanger, you obtain roughly 1,000 publication for heat exchanger. And when you look at the patent, you obtain a little bit less than 20,000 patent based on heat exchanger world. And when you look at additive manufacturing plus heat exchanger, you obtain just a little bit less than 200 patent per year and a little bit more than 1,000 publication with these two typical ones, additive manufacturing and heat exchanger. So additive manufacturing and heat exchanger is very specific, how can I say, small area in the heat exchanger world. But I think in some specific application case, it can be a good solution to explore this manufacturing process and how it can be a solution to deliver more efficient solution. So there is a lot of industrial heat exchanger manufacturers that are involved on this topic. So mainly on aeronautic, and because you have all the big company on this topic. So UTC, Raytheon, Safran, GE, Boeing, Airbus, and so on. On the oil and gas market, you have Air Liquide and Linde that are working on this topic. On the automotive area, you have also Valeo and Honda. But on energy and heat exchanger manufacturer, you can see several companies that are involved on this topic, like Westinghouse, Siemens Energy, the French Energy Atomic, the French Atomic Energy Agency. You can also find Alfa Laval, Fifth-Cryo, or Hetrick and Yeta that are subsidiary from the Megit Group. So there is a lot of new companies that are on this exploring this topic. So, but how additive manufacturing can be a solution, or how to take the benefit of this manufacturing process? Because when you design a very complex 3D file, you need to be sure that you will obtain at the end a real part. So you need to take into account a lot of parameters like the internal structure. So it's very interesting if you want to design some very complex internal structure in order to improve the thermal efficiency, but the drawback that you will increase the pressure drop of your parts. One other advantages of the additive manufacturing, you will reduce the number of welding operation by producing a monolithic structure. And the last point is that you can design some parts. You just want to modify some internal structure, for example, and you can produce on demand the final heat exchanger. So as heat exchanger is represented at some very large typical size, you can find heat exchanger on electronic, but also in automotive. On our case, we will be focused on very large or quite massive heat exchanger, because the primary heat exchanger case is in this on this application, or in this case. The last slide on additive manufacturing, excuse me, the last point is at which scale does we need to take into account the additive manufacturing technique. This manufacturing technology introduce a new parameter that you need to be that needs to be taken into account. It's the roughness that is obtained during the manufacturing process, and you will obtain some quite rough parts. So you have to take it into account by modifying your manufacturing process. So, for example, you can make the choice to make some chemical attack to reduce the roughness, or you take it into account during your design by using some new wall law in order to take into account the roughness of the wall. And this roughness is at the micrometer scale, and as for other conventional heat exchanger, you have to take into account the fin thickness, the tube diameter, and the heat exchanger volume. So you have some very large scales from the micrometer to the meter. So it's impossible to take all the scales to take it into account at all scales. So we need to make some choice to consider depending on what we are studying during the design. So if we are developing some very efficient fins, you need to take into account the roughness and the fins and the design and several successive fins in order to work on the fins efficiency. But if you are working on the heat exchanger and the overall performance of the heat exchanger, you need to take into account the manifold, the fluid distribution, the tube diameter, and maybe you will work on equivalent porous model to take into account the fin efficiency in the heat exchanger. So some words about material, because additive manufacturing is very interesting to use some high value alloy. So here it's a comparison of the elastic limit depending on the temperature, and we have made a lot of comparison with several alloy. So you will find on the top the Cockerill 718 and a specific alloy that has been developed for additive manufacturing, so the ABD 900, which is quite competitive to the Cockerill 718, but with some better performance at high temperature. But this alloy is available only for additive manufacturing. We are not implementing this graph the Heinz alloy, but you will find the information from the presentation of Maxime. But as you can see, we will choose in our development in Cockerill 718 thanks to his mechanical property. And because it's widely used in aeronautics, so this alloy is well mastered in additive manufacturing process. But there is an interest to develop some new alloys and sets of additive manufacturing parameters, like for example Heinz alloy, in order to increase the number of available material for future heat exchanger development, because we need to take into account also the corrosion and the compatibility. The compatibility between the fluid and the material. There is also an interest to study this new alloy and their behavior with the creep phenomena, in order to see if, for example, the Cockerill 718 will be sufficient for our solution. So some words about the desalination project. So it's a cluster of 18 industrial and research experts from solar and desalination fields. On the power block project, we are mainly working with Cranfield, ProTarget, Université Politecnico di Milano, and Baker Hughes in order to deliver the carbon dioxide cycle. So the desalination application case is the following one. So we will work on 4 innovative blocks to couple a supercritical power cycle with a desalination block. So we will also have an adaptive coupling cycle, and we will also implement all the 3 new block with the KSU CSP testing plant, where they are using an air Brayton cycle. So a focus on the supercritical carbon dioxide cycle. TEMISTh is in charge to deliver the 3 heat exchangers, the primary heat exchanger, the recuperator, and the condenser. And the challenges for this developments are that on the primary condition, we are at high pressure and a high temperature. In order to deliver a power block efficiency higher than 30%. The other challenge on this new power block is that we will use a mixture of supercritical carbon dioxide in order to improve the power block efficiency. So there is a high stress on the heat exchanger. And now I will speak about the primary heat exchanger on this installation. So we have developed from the past, of the experience of TEMISTh, we have a methodology to deliver our final part. So we work first on the concept and the overall design in order to define the target in terms of heat exchanger coefficient and surface, internal surface, but also in terms of pressure drop. Then we will develop some internal structure. We will produce some mock-up and test the mock-up. So here it will be performed in collaboration with the LUT University. And at the end, we will make the final CAD design and deliver and produce the heat exchanger to be delivered to the KSU plant. So the concept will be based on the Lego concept in order to work on with a modular approach in order to minimize the manufacturing risk. Because one part that I don't talk about before, when you produce one part, you produce your heat exchanger in one part, you can take some risk in order to obtain some manufacturing defects at the end of your production, for example. So, and currently there is no certification to be sure that your heat exchanger will be qualified for installation in the aeronautic, in the launcher application. In the past, there are some break during the manufacturing process. They decided to implement it on the test bench, and the launcher motor was destroyed during the test. So it's very challenging. And on our side, we decided to work mainly on quite small modules, so roughly 300 millimeter by 300 millimeter by 300 millimeter, and to stack it in order to reach the performance. So here the aim is to define the number of modules and their organization in order to reach the overall performance of the primary heat exchanger. So just an overview on what kind of internal structure we can work on. So we have a lot of different internal structure. Some short structure like half tubes or full tubes can be produced by more or less conventional diffusion bonding process, but there is also some other one like toroid or hollow lattice that can be produced only by additive manufacturing. It's in the category of the TPMS structure. Thanks to this different design, we define some parietal front in order to define what kind of structure are in the target area of the module design. For example, here in this process, we obtain some gyroid structure, some half tube, and some tubes. The drawback of the tube and the half tube is that we need a number of modules in order to reach the heat transfer performance. So on the mechanical point of view, we perform also some tests in order to evaluate the safety margin that we can have with all the structure, and we have made some arrangement of the internal structure. So we can see that, for example, regarding the design parameter, you can obtain a lot of results from safety margin that are acceptable to results that which are not acceptable. Just to focus on TPMS structure like gyroid, we work on this typical structure because TPMS structure because it's a very promising structure in order to reduce the volume of the heat exchanger. And here I will just present a couple of results. We have performed two I can say with two period of, because it's a periodic structure, so with two different value of the period. And what you can see is that you increase and we produce it with several thickness. And regarding we obtain in the core of the volume the maximal solid stress, and at the end we can obtain the safety factor. And thanks to this results, you can see that we stay at a safety factor of 6 at the limit of the manufacturing process, because in order to, for example, you can see this typical structure produced by an additive manufacturer, and the typical limiting thickness of this gyroid is around 300 to 400 micron. So with this thickness, you can reach a safety margin of 6, between 5 and 6. Regarding the pressure test that we need to apply in order to qualify our heat exchanger, because we are designing the primary and the recovery heat exchanger with the European pressure design code. So currently we are producing the mock-up in order to validate our hydraulic model. That's why we are just working on straight tubes in order to obtain some proper results. And the test will be performed at the LUT University. So just to conclude, some word about, so as I've shown, the additive manufacturing process is a promising manufacturing process in order to improve the heat exchanger performance, but on some very specific market, because, for example, we will not be competitive to plate heat exchanger, for example. The main interest of this manufacturing process is to use some new alloys, and also to reduce the cost of manufacturing process thanks to this high value alloy. Regarding the desalination project, we are currently manufacturing the mock-ups that will be tested this summer, and we will deliver some promising design for the final primary recuperator and condenser heat exchangers. So thank you, Jitka, and I give you back the floors.
Thank you very much, Damien, for your nice presentation.
Just one more word. I forget to to thank the European Union that funded the desalination project that is supporting these developments.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That was very informative. So this is the last presentation of today. And now we are moving to the last point or points of today's webinar, which is a Q&A session. So I would like to ask my colleagues, all the three presenters, to join me on the stage. And like that, they will be able to answer all your questions that you have. I saw that there were already some questions that remained unanswered. I copied them in my presentation, so I will quickly share my screen. So if I'm not wrong, the first question that you see from Renaud was for the presentation of Maxime. Am I right?
The one about the thermal expansion?
Yeah, the first one that we can see.
Yeah, so actually there was, no, my first question was about the cool heat, because the cooler was presented and I was wondering whether we could see something about the primary heat exchanger, but CERTH replied that unfortunately they didn't have access to that work. So that question is closed. The second one was about the thermal expansion, which is always going to be a massive issue, especially when you're dealing with high temperature and thick sections. And certainly it's a very good illustration. It's a very good concept. I was just wondering if the mechanical aspect of the design has been considered in that particular primary heat exchanger, mainly with regard to thermal expansion. And there was as well, Dinesh asked the question about the ramp-up rate associated. That's for John Cockerill.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
For Damien.
We considered all that. Actually, a lot of the design and the calculations are based on the HyFlex project. I don't know if you know it, but in this project, this is also the same range of temperature and the same gradients. Basically, instead of having supercritical CO2, you have vapor, but mainly on the particle side, this is the same. So we have a special design, especially for the tube sheets, because there is a big thermal expansions between the top and the bottom of the heat exchanger, and it has to be calculated and covered by the design. Yes.
No, that's excellent. I mean, I like your idea of modular design as well, because it helps us cut costs, and standardize things. So that's very impressive. Well done.
And again, for the ramps, think we do usually more or less 60-70 degrees C per minute max for the ramps. But in this case, it wasn't part of the design yet. But this is what we will do, I think.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is Dinesh also happy with the reply, or is there anything else that you need Maxime to cover?
No, I think thank you for giving some range, and yeah, thanks.
Excellent. I think that there is another question of Renaud, if I'm not wrong.
Actually, that's two-pronged questions. The first is because Maxime was referring to the fact that we're working on additive manufacturing, and that's true. We are looking at it. We've got a sister company, HyITA, and we belong to Megit now, Parker Megit, as we'd say. But what we found is that, especially with the large machines, when they have several lasers, which is all about increasing the productivity, there are some issues of excessive heat input into the matrix, which leads to defects and rejects. Is Maxime aware of how the latest machines are addressing that aspect, especially with regards to relatively thin section close to thick sections?
I think it was for Damien, no?
No,
Yes,
not
I think because
Yeah.
yes, I think it was for the question is for me. Yes, it shows that how can I say, mastering the manufacturing process is very important in order to be able to deliver a large quantity of thin structure, and it's clear that at the end, when you have, for example, a 1 kilowatt laser, you obtain 10 kilowatt of energy on your powder bed, and it can be an issue if you don't manage the internal energy that you need to dissipate in the powder bed. Sometimes it's quite difficult to obtain some high value of high temperature of the powder bed, but when you are using a large number of laser, you are facing the opposite in terms of issue. You need to cool the powder bed, and that's sure that currently we are working with the additive manufacturing developer in order to be sure that during the manufacturing process there will be no issue. And regarding your last, you have say what is the latest status on the adoption of additive manufacturing in pressure vessel code? So a few months ago, I was involved in the meeting. So currently, if I'm correct, there is some discussion between France and Germany in order to promote some activity and some methodology in order to help the manufacturer to deliver some parts. And on the ASME side, I think there are more in advanced stage. I think it has been published. I will check it, but I think the US are more in advanced stage than in Europe regarding the qualification process.
Yeah, the US has released a guidelines for the publication of code case for direct energy deposition, but they have not done anything yet at that level for the powder bed.
Okay.
Which is unfortunate because most of the work of interest is in the powder bed. So
yeah,
but it's just for everybody's interest, just so they understand. How do you plan to then deploy those heat exchangers in a facility? Will you have them inside a pressure vessel for qualification?
Yeah. No.
Okay.
The requirement is to, as we are at the TRL 6 for the project, the requirement is to make all the simulation and the tests as if we were qualified, but there is no requirement of qualification with the Lloyd's or the DNV office. For example, but we will make all the tests. So we will make all the material tests. So we will make a hydraulic test on the heat exchanger before delivering the heat exchanger to the plant.
Okay, thank you.
I see there's one more question from Matthew James. I'm not sure for who this question is. Is there any active R&D to design modular additive manufacturing heat exchangers? So maybe it's for you, Damien.
Yes. What do you mean R&D because I think I've presented that we are working on modular heat exchanger. and we will, for example, for the primary heat exchanger of the desalination, we will produce 3 modules that will be assembled or welded together. So that's, yes, we are working on a design methodology in order to produce some modules and after implement it. But the advantage of the additive manufacturing is that we can also make some small design modification on between each module in order, for example, to modify the pressure drop flow from one module at the inlet to the last module at the outlet of the heat exchanger.
Okay, I think that we are done with questions that were written in the meeting chat. Are there any other questions? Maybe somebody would like to ask a question normally without writing. If this is not the case, then I think we can conclude this session. If in the future you still have questions, you can always come back to us, and we will make sure that your question is answered. So if really nobody wants to say anything, any parting message, any more questions, then I would like to thank to everyone, to all the speakers that delivered excellent presentations. I would like to thank also to all the participants for participating and for the engagement during the questions and Slidos. That was really great. A lot of questions, and we are happy that you did ask, and we had some exchange of views. And we are hoping to see you next time. You will be informed about the topic and about the timing, and we are looking forward to seeing you already now. Have a nice afternoon, and talk to you soon. Goodbye.